All right, if you would open to Ecclesiastes chapter 6 at the end of it. We're going to begin in verse 10 this morning. It's been my experience, I don't know, maybe Mr. Danny here's had the same experience, that when you start going through a book or something like this, that somewhere around midway, sometimes our zeal for continuing may wane a little bit, you know. I haven't heard that from any of you, so I don't think that I have at all. But if it's that way, I want to encourage you, stick with it, okay? We passed the halfway point last week, and so stick with it. The sense of it's a good feeling when you finish studying a whole book. You know, there's a lot we can learn from it. So stick with it as we go through it. Chapter 6, verse 10. You remember that last week we looked at these fellows who had money. They were rich. And the problem was that they loved money. It wasn't that the money was the issue. That money itself was wrong. They loved it. And because they loved it, they didn't have anything else in their life. They missed out on the lives of their children. They missed out on the lives of their loved ones. They didn't enjoy any day. They were miserable people. All right, couldn't give you anything. And so at the end of that section, we have these couple of verses before we go into chapter 7. And they really sort of segue. They tie in from what he just said, and they sort of segue us into the next section where he says this in verse 10. Whatever exists has already been named, and it is known what man is, for he cannot dispute with him who is stronger than he is. For there are many words which increase futility. What then is the advantage to a man? For who knows what is good for a man during his lifetime, during the few years of his futile or vain life? He will spend them like a shadow, for who can tell a man what will be after him under the sun? So whatever exists has already been named. We've heard language like that already in this book, haven't we? When we think about this idea of something that has been named, whatever exists has already been named. What we're talking about is something that's been called into existence, something that's been made. It's not just like you and I when we place a name on something, okay? This is something that was created. It's named. We think of the language of creation, and we should. This is where our mind should go when we think about these things that already exist and that they've already been named. And God said, right, let there be light, and there was light. Okay, this is this right here. All right. So God has named things. God's named what's always been: clouds, sky, light, darkness, the moon, the sun, the stars, everything that goes along with it already exists. God made those things, and God named those things, right? And so it's interesting to me that along with that, he says, and it is known what man is. Let me ask you, when we think about creation and being named, who is it that made us? We know the answer to that. We do. The world says something different. We'll talk about that momentarily. But we know that God made us. Do you remember when God made man? What did he call him? Remember the name? We do. Adam, right? Do you know what Adam means? Adam means dirt. It means ground. It means dust. Okay? In Genesis chapter 3, verse 19, the Lord says, from dust you came, and to dust you will return. And so we should recognize then, the finite nature of our lives. Okay? We're not infinite. We're not eternal like God from everlasting to everlasting. Okay? We have a certain amount of time under the sun, right? Certain amount of time in this life. And when we breathe our last, we will go back to our physical part of us, right? We're going to go back to dirt. We're going to go back to dust. Okay? And if that's all there was, that'd be pretty gloomy. That's not the picture he's trying to paint for us here. He's trying to let us know our place, where we are. You remember a few weeks ago, some of the language. God is in heaven and you are on the earth. So, remember your place, right? We're weak. We're finite. We're dust, okay? And he says this, for he cannot dispute with him who is stronger than he is. And so who's stronger than us in this passage? That's God, right? That's God. Let me ask you, you ever know of anyone in the scriptures to dispute with God and win? I should clarify. And come out victorious? No. I think about what came to my mind here, and maybe it did yours as well when you were studying it, is Job. The book of Job, again, another book that falls in this genre of wisdom literature in the Old Testament. And Job, you recall, had these friends that were landed on him thick, and but at the end, Job does step out of line, right? And he's disputing with God in a way that he ought not be doing. So the picture is, you remember, God appears to him in a whirlwind, right? So here's this tornado in front of this man who's disputed with the Almighty. And God says to him this language, gird up your loins. And I'm going to ask you a few questions. In our language, buckle up. Because I'm fixing to lay it to you. And so God starts to ask him some questions. And he's laying some questions down on him. Interestingly enough, to me, they almost all deal around creation. Right? At the end of that, and let me encourage you this afternoon when you got some free time, read chapters 38 through 42 in Job. Your mouth will just be open at the awesomeness of the Creator. You know, I laugh and tear up at the same time when I'm reading and seeing this conversation in my mind. At the end of it, though, here's what Job says. Job says, I'm insignificant. I declared things that I didn't know anything about, and I'm putting my hand over my mouth. I relent and I repent in sackcloth and ashes. I should have never done what I did. Right? You're not going to dispute with God and come out a victor. It's simply not going to happen. So don't waste your time. And what Solomon's trying to get across to us here, as we're moving from this thing of this transition of money, is don't sit there and argue with God about your unhappiness because he gave you everything and you missed it because you praised the wrong thing, right? And so don't dispute with God, for there are many words which increase futility. What then is the advantage to a man? What's your advantage? To argue and dispute with God? That's a rhetorical question, isn't it? The more you talk, the more you're wasting your breath, is the point, when you're arguing with God. There is no advantage to it. Zero. Don't do that. Okay? That's what we're taking away from it. Don't sit there and dispute with God. It's not going to do us any good. We're wasting valuable time in the few days that we have here under the sun. Don't do that, right? For who knows what is good for a man during his lifetime, during the few years of his futile life. Mine says futile, yours may say vain. It's that idea we've been promoting from the get-go. This word means a vapor, a breath. It's a whisper. You know, the psalmist, when you look over at Psalm 103:14, when he's actually talking about dust there, you might put that down as a note for that. But the idea in the verses surrounding it is that the wind comes across the grass. You know how you see the wind come across the grass and sort of go across it and then it's gone? That's the picture of life. And who is it that knows what's good for a man during his lifetime? Again, rhetorical. What man does? He doesn't. And we see this in other places in Scripture. Proverbs 14:12, if you're taking notes, Jeremiah 10:23, you know, Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself, is not in man who walks to direct his steps. You know, there's a way that seems right to man, but what's the result? The end of it is death. That's what we learn. And so relying upon ourselves, relying upon our own wisdom, no, that's not going to work. Who can tell a man what will be after him under the sun? What person can do that? Nobody can. This is only God. All right? So don't waste our time. Let's not waste our time disputing with God all right, over the things in the last part of the chapter and what we're about to look at, all right? And he makes this transition where we get to chapter 7. And this is an interesting chapter because of the way that we're going to be taught. This gave me a lot of time for reflection this week. In chapter 7, he moves to these 14 verses. We're just going through verse 14, so don't get scared. But he gives these different things that are better than others. All right. Now, as we've gone along, and I really appreciate seeing those of you who are marking in your Bibles now, and you have seen you with highlighters. That brings joy to my heart any way that you're doing so. In this section, you'll have where he says the phrase "better than." We've noticed that up to this point, and in this chapter, you're going to see it like 8 or 9 different times. Okay, things that are better than doing other. So what we're looking for is we recognize I'm not going to argue with God. So how am I going to go through this life and navigate this life, and how should I view life in order to get the most out of it? I don't want to be like these rich folks who loved money and that didn't do them any good. They died miserable. Don't want to be like that. How am I going to navigate this, right? And so he says some things that are sobering. That's one thing about Solomon, man. He just doesn't put any varnish on it at all. He just gives it to us. And this is what he says. A good name is better than a good ointment or a good perfume. And the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. Now that's hard to hear, isn't it? Would you rather go to a birthday party or a funeral? Most people would rather go to a birthday party, right? Solomon says, but that's not necessarily, in his teaching here, that's not necessarily going to give you the best teaching to get through life, okay? So he goes down and he says some things, and he uses this through verse 6, and then we'll come back and talk about it. It's better, listen to what he says, it's better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting, because that's the end of every man. And the living takes it to heart. Sorrow, listen, is better than laughter. For when a face is sad, a heart may be happy. The mind of the wise is in the house of mourning, while the mind of fools is in the house of pleasure. It is better to listen to the rebuke of a wise man than for one to listen to the song of fools. For as the crackling of a thorn bushes under a pot, so the laughter of the fool, and this too is futility. So what is he saying to us here? A good name's better than a good perfume, and the day of my death is better than the day of my birth? Here's what we have as the teacher to try to help us navigate life and get the most out of it. He's using death as a teacher. Here, death is an evangelist. The coffin is your teacher. All right? Now, what he wants to get across to us is the reality of death, and he uses it as an incentive for us to embrace wisdom as we go through life. So what Solomon's saying is start with the end in mind, all right? Look at the end. How do you want to die? You think about this idea of a name. When a child's born, we give that child a name. That's cool. We like it. We think for months and months and months about it, figuring if we're going to come with a good one, we want to give them a good name. When that child's born and we give them that name, that's really all that child has. Everything else is sort of guesswork, isn't it? Does that baby have mama's eyes? Or does that child have daddy's hair? Or is that child, like grandma or grandpa, right? It's all guessing. It's all in front of you. Fun, we love it, and we should, all right? But go down the road 85, 86 years after the birth, right? And then think about the name of that child. What name does that child have now when he's come to the end? What are people going to say about that child, him or her, right? Oh man, he loved his bingo. Right? He loved to cut up, have a good time. Or might it be, she really loved the Lord. That woman was a servant. She could laugh and have a good time, but man, she could serve. She loved Jesus, right? You see how the name means something different at the end than what it means at the beginning? And this is what Solomon wants to get across to us, right? The fool doesn't do this. The fool doesn't think about the end. No, the fool doesn't do that. He wants to avoid it. The fool is the one, notice, he's the one that goes to the house of feasting in verse 2. He's going to go have a good meal. Man, free drinks, open bar, that's where I'm going, right? That's the fool. The wise person, he goes into the house of mourning. Why does he do that? Because he realized this is a place where I can change my life. You see, the wise person here that thinks this way and thinks about the end, he's the one that creates depth in his life. He creates character. He lets death shape him, right, the way it should. And so he doesn't go to the house of feasting because he realizes, look, that's the end of every man. Think about that. I don't care how old you are in here. Listen to me. All right? You're going to die. You're going to die. And we need to come to grips with that fact that we're going to die. Okay? Now, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more at the end, but as we go through it, realize just because you're young doesn't mean you're not going to die. We don't think that we're going to die when we're young. And we don't live our life with meaningful purpose every day because we don't think it's ever going to end. And I would say that sometimes it doesn't matter when we get to 50, 60, 70. We still sometimes don't even think this is going to come to an end. Right? Solomon's trying to teach us here. Face the fact that life is going to come to an end. That's the end of every man. And the living, take it to heart. That's what he wants us to do. Take this to heart. Right? Okay. So, he continues. Sorrow is better than laughter. Why? For when a face is sad, a heart may be happy. You've been that before, right? Haven't you? Where your heart is full, but the tears are flowing. We've had friends that have gone before us who were faithful. These were great mentors and examples and followers of Christ that we loved, that we cherished. And they've gone on. And so the tears can be flowing, but the heart can be full because we know where they are, right? Solomon wants us to be this way, right? To live this way. And so the mind of the wise, it's in the house of the mourning. The fool, the person who doesn't look at death and come to grips with death, the fool, he's in the house of pleasure. It's just about now. Man, feed me, fill me, pay me, whatever it takes, numb me, I'm just not going to I'm not going to go in there with those losers that are crying. That's the fool's view. And he says, it's better to listen to the rebuke of a wise man than for one to listen to the song of fools. Why would it be good for me to listen to a rebuke? I don't like to be rebuked. Do you? I don't. But you know what? The wise person, or the person who's going to be wise and understands death, is going to listen to that. Good leaders, a lot of times, they don't listen to the people that only sing their praises. They listen to the people, they listen to the detractors. Because they want to see, and if there's any merit to what the detractors are saying, then they're going to take that and they're going to use that to shape themselves to be better. Again, we're talking about building depth of character here, right? Living with purpose, a fulfilled life, because I understand that I only get a very little bit of it. I'm not going to listen to the fool. The little proverb that he gives here, the crackling of the thorn bushes under a pot, so the laughter of the fool. The idea of, you put some tinder or some kindling under a fire to start it and you light it on fire. You've heard it all crack and pop before like that. And he says that's the futility of it. It's here and gone, and it's useless, no value. Okay? There's no value to that. So listen to the rebuke of the wise man. You'll have much more depth of character, right? Much more purpose in life than you will to listen to the fool who's just spattering on and is only worried about the house of pleasure. Now, what I think we see here is in this contrast, and he's trying to give you this picture to say, okay, because death is coming, use wisdom over folly as you navigate through life. But as we look at folly and we think about the fool is a master at escaping reality, doing his best to try to escape reality. How did he do it? And here he did it in feasting, he did it in laughter, he did it in the house of pleasure, right? And earlier we saw where, drinking, sex, all these different things, these are all employed as, I'm not dealing with life, right? I'm trying to escape. And this is what the fool's trying to do, not face life. And living a life where, wherever it takes him, no direction whatsoever, no purpose whatsoever. Let me ask you, did that just happen back then? Or is it happening today? How about people that live completely? They have one life, a physical life that they live, but then they have their social media life. And those two don't look anything alike. Nothing alike. Why? Because I just don't want to deal with what's in front of me. I want to create the one that I sort of like, the dream world, where everyone talks nice about me and I'm pretty or I'm strong or whatever it is, I'm rich, however it is. Escaping reality, not facing reality, right? Renaissance fairs, Trek conventions, Star Trek conventions, all these kind of things. Not wrong to go have a good time, for crying out loud, but for those people who sort of live in that realm because they don't want to face reality, right? We try to escape in every possible way we can. And he goes on and he gives us 4 other ways that fools do this. First of all, notice what he says. Oppression makes a wise man mad. A bribe corrupts the heart. And so extortion. I want a shortcut, man. Grease my palm. I want to cut the line, right? Even the wisest person, when dollar signs come into it, sometimes it's just too much, right? You know the old saying, everyone has a price. We don't want to be people who have a price, okay? We don't want to be people who have a price, that we can be bought out. The end of a matter is better than its beginning. Well, that sounds like what he said in verse 1. Patience of spirit is better than haughtiness of spirit. What's he trying to get across here? Be patient. Finish what you started. Starting's easy, right? If you're like me, you got projects at the house, right? You started grand projects, grand plans, and they got a good start and they're still in shambles because you never finished that sucker, right? Yeah. Can't shortcut it. Be patient. Go through it, finish it, get it done. Don't be eager in your heart to be angry, for anger resides in the bosom of fools. Don't be quick to get mad. The wise person, what does he say? The wise person says, hey, just calm down a little bit. Let's see how this shakes out. We only got so much time on this planet. And if I rush in there and do something, I may ruin a lot of that time that I've got here. Right? So don't be like the fool who says, whatever happens, happens, man. I'm going in swinging. Right? And then here's one we need to contemplate. Verse 10. Don't say, why is it that the former days were better than these? For it's not from wisdom that you ask about that. Now we've done that, haven't we? We're looking at nostalgia as a way of escaping reality. Now, we do this a lot. I do it. I grew up in the 80s, man. Everything was perfect in the 80s. You know? And nothing wrong with looking back and having good memories. The Lord made us to have memories. And it could be this. It could be that there were times in your life before now, where things were better than they are now. Okay, that's all right. But Solomon says, when you start asking why was it better then than it is now, he says that's not from wisdom that you're doing that. We ought not be doing that. Why is that? How come? Because what we do is we forget God in the present. You know, we say, okay, in the past it was better, and God must have been there, but now God's not here now. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Don't say that. God's here, and we're going to read in just a minute that God's here in the bad times. All right, in the bad times. And so, in thinking about life and death is what he's trying to use for us here. Take the path of wisdom instead of the path of the fool. All right, as you walk. That's the general message here. And use wisdom. But listen, wisdom, as we choose that path, let's see what he has to say about that. He says in verse 11, wisdom, along with an inheritance, is good, and an advantage to those who see the sun. That see the sun, that sounds like under the sun, doesn't it? Same thing. Those people who are alive. Wisdom is a great advantage, and an inheritance, it's good. I'd like to get an inheritance. I haven't found my rich uncle yet. I'm hoping there's one out there, right? An inheritance is good. And an advantage to those who see the sun. For wisdom, this is what he says, wisdom is protection just as money is protection. Hey, there's money in a favorable light, isn't it? Yeah. Money is protection. But the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the lives of its possessors. And so here's the thing. You may have a little money. You may get a little inheritance. You may keep it for a while. You may be able to stick it in the bank and pass it on to your kids. Chances are, though, that money eventually it's going to go away. Right? It's going to go away. But wisdom can be passed down from generation to generation to generation. And it can continue to do its good. I think about the wisdom we're reading this morning. Man, it's 3,000 years old. Right? And just as applicable today as it was then. Aren't we thankful for that? But here's what we need to understand. This is what Solomon wants to get across to us. That wisdom is the best course to choose while you're in this life. In view of death, you live wisely, have some depth of character, but you need to understand this. Wisdom has its boundaries. It can only take you so far. All right? Wisdom by itself, can only take you so far. This is what he says. Consider the work of God, for who is able to straighten what he has bent? We heard that language before. If you're taking notes, write down chapter 1 and verse 15. Let me ask you this. Are you ever going to be able to have enough wisdom, possess enough wisdom, to sit back and view what God has bent in creation and say, I can bend it straight. I can move it back straight. I'm never going to have that much wisdom. He's given me limits and parameters, right? I can't straighten that out. And here's what he says. Listen, wisdom here. In the day of prosperity, be happy. But in the day of adversity, consider God has made the one as well as the other, so that man will not discover anything that will be after him. Doesn't that sound like the end of verse 12 in chapter 6? Man won't discover it. Here's the thing. Are you ever going to be able to have enough wisdom to be able to peek behind the curtain and look at everything God did and how he did it and change it? Nope. And should I be grateful to God? Well, what do we learn here? God gave us a day of prosperity. We like those days. Those are the ones we like, right? But let me ask you something. When you get up to go to work tomorrow, if it's not a prosperous day, right? You're facing adversity at every turn tomorrow. You know, doctors ain't answering phones. Pharmacists ain't filling prescriptions. You know, bosses ain't acting right. People aren't carrying their load. Whatever you want to call it, however you want to see it, the adversity that comes with tomorrow, should I think, well, God didn't make this day too? No, God made that day too. God made that day too. So how am I going to live? I'm going to live in gratitude in view of the fact that I've only got so long to live, right? And I want to die I want to die with a good name. Now, to wrap this up, I want to ask you this question, okay? That's some pretty heavy stuff, I think. I want to ask you this, and I'm doing this myself too, so when I speak this way, understand me too. What are you going to do with this? When Solomon says you really need to consider death, and that the ending is better than the beginning, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it this afternoon? What are you going to do with it this week? Let me encourage you to do this. Take some time, right? This afternoon, probably the best time. Tomorrow you're going to hit it back at work, school, whatever it is. And life gets in there. And we want to live it right. Take some time. Get up, turn off the phone, shut off the TV. Get out a pen and paper. Or just at least spend some meditative time thinking, how do I want to die? We're not talking about the method. We all just want to go to bed and go to sleep, right? I'm not talking about that. What I'm saying is, how is it that I want to be viewed when I die? When I die, Yeah, we talked about giving a child a name at the beginning. We talked about the end. Sometimes we get that right when we ascribe, a reputation to somebody. A lot of times we don't. But here's what I do know. I do know this. God knows my name. And I want to have a good name in front of the Almighty. So how can I order my life and order my days in view of the fact that there are very few of them and that death is certain? How can I live to make sure that I have a good name in front of the Almighty? I hope you'll take some time to stew on that and meditate on it. We're not talking about some morbid curiosity with death and always think about dying. This is about living. For crying out loud. This is about living and living the best life we can. So when the end does come, we're ready for it, right? We're ready for it. All right. I hope this is helpful to you. And if you find yourself in need of prayers, need of help, not ready for death, we want to do the best we can to help you prepare for that and walk alongside with you. If you need to respond, we'd ask you to come now. Let me know as we stand and as we sing.